And we're back with episode 17 of the Noble Shit podcast, sponsored by the Noble brand. And today I am burning Harvest Table candle. It's tomato leaf, rosemary, basil. It smells like a breath of fresh air, just like my guest, Adria, who I am elated to have here. She is someone that I am growing to know, an amazing pillar in the community, an amazing woman, somebody who has battled chronic illness her entire life, somebody that shows up in the wellness space with so much grace and class and substance, not just the performative things you see or the trendy things you see online. She is a new author, which we're going to get into. She is all of the things. Hello, Adria. How are you?
Hi, my dear. Thank you for that introduction. That means a lot to me, and I
Absolutely.
appreciate that so much. I am doing wonderful. As I told the last person I met with, I'm doing peachy today. So
Yes,
that's how I'm doing. How are you
I
feeling?
love that. I am doing amazing now. And actually, you beat me to the punch because I always open up with the question, how are you? And the number one rule is you can't say I'm good.
I live by that because I'm like, good is not a feeling. Good is not a feeling.
No, nope.
Um, but I can give you some more feelings. Peachy isn't necessarily a feeling either, but I think you could gather what I mean by that. I
Hmm.
am feeling very grounded, for one. I
Hmm.
feel very grounded. I feel curious, coming into here and just kind of in like the new season I'm in. Like curiosity has been a really big thing, and I feel excited. I've been looking forward to just like conversing with you and like just like we said before we hopped on, like having a conversation with my new homegirl, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for many of the people that may not know you, how would you define Adria in 5 words?
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna use the labels because that's kind of what the ask is. I would define myself as a writer. I would define myself as a healer. I'm a teacher. I'm somebody's sister. And lastly, I would say like I'm a creator. I create.
Beyond the label, who is Adria?
Oh my goodness. Beyond the labels, I'm thinking like how would my sister actually describe me? That's such a good question. Beyond the labels, I am a methodical person. I'm very silly and
Hmm.
I'm very loving. I'm all about like my people. And I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what comes up for me is like beyond how I could define myself with singular words. I
Hmm.
really am like a humanist
Yes.
at heart. So, yeah, and sometimes I think of myself as a comedian. Sometimes if you're sitting with me, you might be like, "Oh, wait." Um, and yeah, methodical as ever. Very,
Hmm.
very methodical.
Have
Yeah.
you been like that your whole life?
That's what my siblings say. I've been pretty like precise my whole life. I also um have been silly. My mom would probably say I got a lot of moxie.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but yeah, I feel like I've been that way my whole life. Since I was a little girl. Very like forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, for the people that may not know you, I mentioned in your intro, you have been dealing with a chronic illness
Yeah.
your entire life.
Yeah.
Um, did your methodical approach to life, or is your methodical approach to life a result of your
Come on.
experience with chronic illness? Because I know for me, being somebody who's chronically ill, I was already type A, but I had to become even more type A plus plus plus, if you will.
Yes, literally.
Yeah. So
Thank you
let's
so
talk
much.
about it.
Yes, and thank you so much, like, for that. And I think like it's definitely like a therapy question too, because that's a question that's come up in my therapy, which is like, did the chicken come before the egg, or did the egg come before the chicken? And
Mhm.
I do think I'm going to answer this in two parts, because the question of like, who is Adria beyond the labels is like, I'm finding her, because I had to become so much because of the illness. Because no one talks about just the physical, um, psychological, emotional aspects. Yes, that takes so much. Um, you have to be very particular. You have to be on top of it, but also financially, the things that keep you safe, like survival wise. So I
Mhm.
definitely think that that methodicalness, if that's a word, that type A, as people would say, comes from having Crohn's disease, which is autoimmune illness, and it affects the digestive system. And even just to the point of like, germs, like how I was like around, like, okay, what am I touching? How often am I washing my hands? Like those really detailed things, to how am I organizing my day. And before we
Mhm.
hopped on here, I mentioned like having to work in a specific way to make sure I'm not depleting my energy, because I am learning. I've had Crohn's for 20 years, but I'm just now learning like how to dance with the reality of like when you get that energy. And I think I've heard you talk about like kind of getting locked in on something. It's because
Mhm.
when you have that brain power and you have that energy, it's like this is the moment to take advantage of it, because I might not have it, in the
Right.
next moment. I might not have it tomorrow. So
Mhm.
I definitely think I became a little bit more rigid. I would actually use the word rigid,
Okay. Uh-huh.
as a result of having the Crohn's. And to some of it, it's a benefit. It's wonderful. And then in other aspects, as you probably know, it's not so great. Rigidity can cause like constriction, and that's not really great for a body that is fighting or healing or living with illness. However, people are dealing with their chronic illness. Everyone's in a different place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally relate to that for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I have always been, like I said, very type A, but you know, autoimmune, my autoimmune disease is fairly new to me. I'm only 6 years in, compared to your 20. And it hit me hard and fast. Hard and fast. I went from being peak health in January of 2019. I went in for a physical, markers great, perfect, no issues, to by October of 2019, I had lost, between actually August and October, I had lost 40 pounds of muscle mass, could not walk up a flight of steps, heart palpitations. It was bad. And I was like, what happened? Everybody was like, what happened? I went back to my primary. They did all the blood panels, and they're like, you have markers for some type of autoimmune condition. So they referred me over to a rheumatologist. By the grace of God, like truly, 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 I was assigned to a rheumatologist who studied specifically my autoimmune disease in school.
Mm,
Um, so I was correctly diagnosed immediately.
mm,
And becoming a first-hand member of the chronic illness community, um, and not just an ally or a supporter or a caregiver, um, opened me up to some realities that you just don't understand until you live it.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought my self-advocacy and what I have to do just to advocate for myself as a Black woman in America was a lot. Add a chronic illness to it, add a disability to it. Man, what? I became very, very rigid, almost too rigid.
Yeah.
Um, so my follow-up question to you is, how do you, or maybe it's something you're still figuring out, but how do you find that like perfect balance of give and rigidity? Like, I think I'm a visual person, so I think of like skyscrapers. You know, they have to be super, super, super structured. But the taller they are, they still have to be flexible to move with the wind or else they'll crumble. So when I think of people with chronic illnesses, I see us as skyscrapers. We have to be rooted. We have to have some level of rigidity. But what's that give look like for you?
First of all, thank you for sharing with me because we, as people will hear, we're still getting to know each other. And I think every time a person, a woman, especially a Black woman, opens their mouth to express their lived experience, something shifts, somebody's life changes because we
Mm-hmm.
do not have enough safe space to express what we go through. And then the further you are in the margins, because we live in a racialized society, the harder
Yes.
it is, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to say that and like uplift you because it's not easy.
Thank you.
So thank you. And what came up for me, you spoke about skyscrapers and you mentioned God and I'm a spiritual person. Two things came up for me. One, I was prophesized over. This was probably after my first surgery, and the prophecy, and everyone is different. I'm not as religious as I used to be, but this prophecy stuck with me around being like bamboo,
Mm-hmm.
very similar to what you're speaking to, which is like bamboo is so strong and it roots down. It take literally its roots are so, I forget like the particular amount, but I mean rooted down, okay? And it bends and it
Yes.
doesn't break. And it's just as strong as like it builds structures,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what came up for me. I don't know why, but I think anyone who is wondering, like, how can I bend without breaking should look up the story around bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, first of all, perfection gets left at the door. There's no perfect.
Hello.
It's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. And I'll be quite honest with you. Like I have not shared my hardest, most difficult parts. Like I think I can share the idea of something. I can share what I'm about to go through. When I got out of my first surgery, which was almost 15 years ago, I immediately showed my scar because it was a scar that healed from a wound. So it didn't look like an incision scar. It was wide, and the only way for me to like be able to live with it was to show it. That was my coping
Yeah.
mechanism. So I
Yeah.
always tell people like you have to find a way to live with it. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday around how we're obsessed with curing. We're obsessed with healing even.
Mm-hmm.
What I am really passionate about is how can I live well with something? Because I got
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed when I was 12 years old. And when you're
Yeah.
12, you're at the whim of the adults around you. They are actually your advocates. They feed you the food. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Inkster. The Food Max up the street was what was feeding me. I ended up getting a digestive illness. Okay. We live in food desert. There's environmental, there's all these things. So perfect doesn't, we're under systems. So therefore perfection isn't existing now. And I've been using this analogy for a while. Your chronic illness, and take it or leave it, and for anyone listening, is like your kid. Now, some people don't know they're pregnant for a while. That's the not being able to get diagnosed. My dad has Crohn's. So when I was symptomatic, it became obvious that I also had Crohn's. So like you, we got our diagnosis a little fast. So we knew we were pregnant. Okay. Once you get your diagnosis, it's almost like you're giving birth. That's how I look at it. It's like once you really know what is going on, you've given birth. So your baby is 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You're 6 year old, you're still learning like how to be a parent at when you're a child.
Yeah.
You got one singular kid, maybe you got two, but you're still learning how to be a parent. My chronic illness is, and this does not apply to everyone, but my illness is 20. My illness is off at college. Does it stress me out sometimes? Yes, it does. What are you doing? What are you up to? Like it's more independent. But that took
Mm-hmm.
time because early on I was trying to learn and you get all this input from everybody. Everyone has an opinion around chronic illness. And there's most of the time people that ain't never lived a day with it, respectfully. And that's
Oh,
important
yes.
because an ally is someone that says, I don't understand and I want to learn. Let me go do my own research. But also, an ally is someone that says, how can I help you live with this, not get rid of it, right? Because at the end of the day, we can't snap our fingers and it's gone. We still have to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be there. So I get the bigger picture of desiring, like, how to get it under control, which is important. But early days, I mean, I was young and I struggled and I lived under medical coercion where my dad was telling me that I shouldn't take medicine. So
Mm-hmm.
I was dealing with like abuse and neglect, which was greatly impacting my ability to be well. And it's taken so much time to get to this point where this is my baby. Some people have real babies, some people buy houses, buy cars. What I have is my Crohn's, and my Crohn's is precious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to be judged or for me to set aside and say, I'm not going to claim it. Even that language, be careful because I, when my Crohn's is telling me like, okay, something's happening, I listen.
Mm-hmm.
Early days, I wasn't listening as much because I wanted to live the way I wanted to live. I was a teenager. I wanted to hang out with my friends and run the streets and have boyfriends or, like I wanted certain things that my Crohn's was like, hello, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Right.
I'm your now. I'm your everything. And
Yes.
that's my long-winded answer, but I've always wanted to share that in a space like this because
Mm-hmm.
think about it. Like you're raising a baby, you raising a child, okay?
Yeah.
How you
Yeah.
gonna raise it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, question for you because your journey is completely different from mine.
sure.
In that you were diagnosed so young. Um, like I was diagnosed when I was 27.
Mm,
So
mhm.
I had lived some life how I wanted to.
Yes, yeah,
So my grief journey looks very specific in that to this day, and I feel like I was talking on the last episode about grief and how it's something that's kind of just with you for the rest of your life. It molds and it shifts and it morphs and it looks different, but it's something that's kind of just with you.
yes,
My grief journey looks like mourning the life that I thought I was going to continue to
yeah,
have. And for me, it's hard, not necessarily harder, but it's hard because I had a taste. I was already there. I was living my dream. I started dancing when I was 5. When I was diagnosed, I was professional dancing in LA. That was my dream. That was my goal. I had a studio loft apartment. I have a dog. I have like all these things. I started building my business. I had my dream car. I had the things, I was independent, and to just wake up one day and my body's like, no, no. I can't even walk. Movement is my livelihood. I can't even walk. I can't even stand up for more than 2 minutes at a time because my heart races to the point where I feel like I'm going to pass out and my muscles are going to give out. So now, 6 years later, I am in a period of technically remission, um, where my inflammation markers are so low, barely there. Um, but, and I'm able to do a little bit more, but I
Mm-hmm.
was birthed with triplets. I have scleroderma, polymyositis, and pulmonary hypertension. I have 3 babies I'm taking care of.
That's right.
Um, and yeah, for me, grief is really heavy and it just hits you on some days,
Yeah.
you know. So this is a long way of getting to my question. What does your grief what did it look like and what does it look like now?
Again, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, you got 3 babies. That's the thing. Okay, that's stressful. That's stressful. Um, even and I think this is a really great, beautiful question. Um, the thing about chronic illness is, yes, it's the illness, but it's what the illness has the power to do. Um, and early on, I think because I was under a person who had the disease and really, really, my Angelou says, like, just because you have pain doesn't mean you need to be a pain. My dad was a pain because he had pain, okay?
Yeah.
He really caused a lot of harm. And I remember thinking, like, am I gonna end up like that? So my grief was almost like forward thinking of like, am I gonna be that miserable? Am I gonna be
Yeah.
that? Is that my path? Now, because of the medical coercion, no one was paying attention if I took my medicine, and I wasn't taking it at a certain point. And by the time I got to age 19, I was really sick. And one thing about me is I'm pretty like high functioning. So I was
Mhm.
like getting up every day, and I was at Wayne State at this time. I was at the School of Business, which was my dream was like to go to college and to like get a degree like everybody else.
Mhm.
And I got into the School of Business, and I remember between classes I would go sleep in my car because I literally like felt like if I knew the feeling of like dying, that's how it felt. Like I felt like my battery was going.
Mhm.
And I just was continuing, and I was walking with this idea of like your mind is what heals you. That's the programming I got. But that
Mhm.
was having me ignore my body.
Mhm.
And I woke up one day at my mom's, thankfully. I spent the night. I chose to spend the night. I was 19 years old. Chose to spend the night at my mom's. I sat up. I slept on the floor because with my belly, like sometimes sleeping on a bed, it just was so uncomfortable. So I would sleep just on the floor, just flat. And
Mhm.
I sat up, and the pain that I had been feeling for 7 years wasn't going away. Because the thing is, like, my pain would come and then would go. It would come, it would go, it would come all day long.
Mhm.
I woke up and it wasn't going away. And I knew that something was wrong. And that day I went into sepsis. That
Wow.
day I was put on life support. That day I lost everything I knew. And even like the the year after, just loss after loss after loss.
Yeah.
Mm. Having to learn how to get up again, having to learn I lost all my muscle mass.
Mhm.
That grief was the most potent in my life. So I just had a surgery recently, which you know about in January, but that surgery taught me a lot about living And I was fortunate enough to survive that. I was in and out of the ICU for about 2 months, and I went home with an open wound, and I survived. And a year later, my car got repossessed because I couldn't work and I didn't know how to get disability. Like, that's how much ignorance I was raised around, and how much
Yeah.
ignorance that I was birthed into, that no one could really help me pay $143 car note. Um, and I lost my car, and then a year later, I filed bankruptcy at 21. Um, by myself. I like paid this lady in River Rouge to like do my paperwork, and I took it to the clerk, and so much grief. That was probably like the most potent my grief has been, of like not even being able to imagine what life could be like. I had no idea. I don't have any idea what life could be like. What am I worth? And
Yeah.
that's really where my grief lied, was what am I worth?
Mhm.
And as time went on and you keep walking, and you know this, you kind of just you keep walking, the weather changes. And that's like, grief is very interesting because the weather changes in your grief.
Mhm.
And now I grieve on purpose. I grieve on purpose because I don't know any life outside of my illness. My illness has
Yeah.
been, I spent 12 years, being a kid, and like, but my whole life has been kind of like centered around Crohn's disease, and
Mhm.
centered around you're going to need another surgery, centered around flares that I have just gotten used to. Like, I will be maneuvering around, and my doctors will be like, "You're not okay." Like,
Yeah.
they have to kind of pull me in because that survival mode is crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And so now I grieve on purpose because I know even these things that we're speaking of, they can't stay here for too long. They got to cycle out because my body is running the show, as it should
Yeah.
be, you know?
Yeah.
Mm, So that's what comes up for me when you ask that question, is like, and we're all grieving different stages in different places. And yet still the grief is potent. It is,
Mhm.
you know, it's something that stops me in my tracks, honestly. I'm like, and the last thing I'll say is, after this last surgery that I got to plan for, um, which I was really grateful because I was taking myself to the doctor. I wasn't practicing the neglect that I was raised in. Um, we were able to say, like, okay, in the next 6 months, we need to take care of this, like, soon. And then
Mhm.
being able to say that, and see that and say that enabled me to, grieve a little bit differently.
Mhm.
Um, so that's I digress there, but that's what comes up for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a that brought up something. So, one, I never heard somebody use the phrase grieving on purpose. And that's crazy that you said that, because that's perfectly fits the phase that I'm in currently. Like, I was talking to my best friend and another friend of mine yesterday and the day before about how, like, I'm just in this heavy season, and crying is hard for me. Like, I feel it, my eyes water, it gets to like here, and then it goes away. But I suppress subconsciously. It's not something where it's like, Sydney, you can't cry, but I just don't. My brain doesn't allow the tears to fall. Um, and the other day, I just gave myself the day to cry. I did it intentionally and on purpose, because one thing a lot of people don't realize is that stress, pent up emotion of any kind, can put us into a flare like nobody's business.
Yes.
And everybody gets time for that. But in some of the things that I am in this current stage actively grieving, um, what I have pinpointed um, is that even in people's lives who have some sort of disability or chronic illness, uh, a lot of us have, to some degree, even if it's just super minute, internalized ableism. And some of the things that I am actively grieving is stemming from my internalized ableism. For example, uh, as of last summer, I'm starting to feel better. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to go out in the streets. We're going to get the spark back. We're going to do the things that just the human Sydney likes to do, not the business owner, not the creative machine, just the human, you know. We're going to go to the concerts. We're going to try the new restaurants. We're going to meet new people. And if it goes somewhere, great. If somebody wants to take us on a date, sure, we'll go. But the internalized ableism with me now starting dating, my self-talk is very weird. It's not sometimes negative, sometimes very doubtful.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only do I have the chronic illness physically disabled me. So I carry a lot. I
Yeah.
require a lot on the front end, you know, and you see people and you see these videos of like these old couples who they're like, okay, will you be able to do this with me 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years down the line? I need you to do this now. And you don't even know me yet. Can
Yeah.
you hold that?
Yeah.
You know, if we go on a date and we go sit down somewhere and the chair's too low, will you make it awkward for me to have to ask for help, to say, hey, can you help me up?
Yeah.
If I can't do this, will you, you know, like, and so my question for you is, in your experience, do you have, or have you ever had any internalized ableism? And if so, how do you work through that? Or even just hold it, because maybe it doesn't go away.
Yeah. That's a excellent question. Um, hmm. Last year, before this current surgery, the surgery plan was to have an ostomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like did everything in my power to like be prepared for that. And what that required of me was to like meet with other people with ostomies.
Mm-hmm.
And that season was me confronting my ableism because my main questions were like, and I don't care what anybody, I was like, so how do you like get intimate? Like my main
Right,
question is like, what's it like? Because for people
right.
that don't know what an ostomy bag is you're pooping out of your,
Mm-hmm.
like from your front, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that forced me to confront, and I ended up not being able to get the ostomy. It wasn't able to be performed, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
That forced me to confront so many things about me, Sydney, which
Yeah.
I literally, my friend Izzy, I told them that I have been running around here like an able-bodied person. That's how
Yes.
deep the ableism was running. Because we're
Yeah.
talking about how I got diagnosed when I was 12. If it
Yeah.
was up to me, I would be running around here and no one would have an idea and I'd just be, but then I
Yep.
flare and then I have needs and then
Yep.
this and then I need a bathroom expeditiously. She's cute, but she gotta go. Okay. Like,
Hello.
and they're contradictory, like to the spirit that we have, the beauty that we have. And then there's this thing, it feels contradictory. Let me not even
Mm-hmm.
say it is because that's the ableism. I just love that you asked this question because I think even just being able to talk about it honestly is I'm still deconstructing it because
Mm-hmm.
we all are born into white supremacist culture, which involves ableism. It involves
Yeah.
racism, the patriarchy, all of these things that say this is the standard. And then we
Right.
date from that place, we employ from that place, we befriend from that place. And I
Right.
realized like, I last year stripped away so much because I became disabled.
Yeah.
But I've always, that's the thing, chronic illness is a disability. We don't all
Yeah.
get it, from the, the authority, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it disables you. And I
Yeah.
realized I had done my community, my friends, the people around me a disservice from one, not leading with the fact that this is real, but also sometimes people can't, if they can't see it, they don't think it's real, right? The invisible
Yeah.
versus visible. There's so
Yeah.
many layers. I'm still deconstructing it. I have to actively work against it because the ableism is also wanting normalcy. But then you have to ask yourself, what is normalcy? And that kind of goes back to what I said about like the obsession around curing.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand people wanting relief and like wanting to live well. Those things make sense. But even coming out of surgery, people are like, I got something where you can drink these juices. And it's like, y'all, I've had Crohn's for 20 years. Y'all need to accept that I have Crohn's. I've accepted it. People
Yeah.
want to fix. They want to
Yeah.
fix something that's not broken.
Yeah.
And I have to really, really root down in my value of like ableism. We're all going to be disabled at some point in our life. Don't get it twisted.
Mm-hmm.
Happened
Mm-hmm.
to us a little bit earlier on, but you're gonna hit that 50, 60, 70 mark, baby. It's coming
Right.
to all of us, okay?
Hello.
And I really, really, I have to actively confront that because I absolutely was like operating like an able-bodied person. And half because of with the call coming from inside the house, but also because of the world we live in. I had no other choice. Okay, so, I did what I had to do, but now it's like I really am working to like, you know, disability justice and educate myself and move towards a space where I'm working against that and yeah, what am I worth? That question keeps coming up, for the last 2 decades. What am I worth? And that leans into that disability able ability kind of. Because I'm just like, if anything you can do, I can do with a chronic illness. So,
Hello.
yeah, respectfully and lightly, because not too much. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think we really harbor the word disability as if it's a flaw and as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a descriptor, or something that is speaking to facts around what somebody can and cannot do, whether that's like seating, and I could go on and on and on, about that. And also, I'll just say to you, we don't live in a world that supports the body in the way that it should. Thinking about seating in places like, in my recovery, my friends were like, we need to get you a cane because I couldn't walk as far. And or like one of those seats, because I would get somewhere and
Mm-hmm.
I need to sit down.
Yep.
We need to get you one of those things. And I'm like, I've never even thought about that.
Yep.
Um, so yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So like I mentioned, one of my babies is polymyositis, which is the body actively trying to deteriorate my proximal muscles. So hips, shoulders, core, the strongest muscle groups are my weakest. Um, so I had to relearn how to walk. I had to honestly even relearn how to stand for a period of time. I was bedridden for a year and a half, and my hamstrings and Achilles had shortened. So when I would stand, my heels wouldn't touch the floor. So I had to get these braces for my feet that would like re-stretch so I could stand properly because my body was starting to compensate, for the way my body was just, holding itself. But all that to say, I had to even give myself permission to use the mobility aids. Like, at first, I was so prideful about it. I didn't want to have to use the cane. And then eventually that graduated to a cane wasn't providing me enough stability. I needed to use a rollator. And that wasn't enough. Eventually I had to upgrade to a wheelchair. And my pride was still strong and stubborn in that wheelchair. I wanted my independence so badly. I did a crowdfunding campaign to buy a like $3,000 automated wheelchair so I could just do and go and all the things. But it's crazy how much that ableism is rooted down in us, from like just the lack of external accessibility in
Sure.
and of itself,
Yeah.
you know. And then it doesn't help that, I mean, disabled people exist. We're out there. But it's sad to think about, there was a day where the ugly laws were a thing, where if you were disabled, you had to be behind closed doors. You couldn't go out in public. You had to be housed with other disabled people and all the things. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember like back in, or not even back, because it wasn't even that long ago. This was just last year, like spring of last year is when I stopped using my wheelchair. Um, like I would go out with my wheelchair and I was invisible. The amount of times I would get cut off, the amount of times I would get ran into, like just don't exist. People don't look down. People aren't spatially aware. If you're not eye level, if you don't appear like
Yeah.
everybody else,
Yeah.
you're disregarded.
Hmm.
But anyway, all I had to say, with having this chronic illness, I know for me, it gets physically lonely, emotionally lonely, mentally lonely. Um, physically lonely, especially like during recovery periods. Like I was diagnosed 2 months before COVID hit, and my immune system was so weak. I had to quarantine in January when I was diagnosed because I couldn't even afford to get a cold because it would send me to the ICU. So I was quarantining literally for 2 years straight. Didn't leave my apartment unless it was an emergency visit to the hospital. And I lost a lot of people. Some people knew what they were doing. Some people, they just kind of stepped away because they didn't have the tools to hold,
Sure.
you know. But in your course of your 20 years, how do you deal with the loneliness that may come from having a chronic illness?
I always have to say, I just appreciate your vulnerability. It's so good. And it just gets me thinking about the world we live in. I'm like, honey, oh my goodness. You know, there's layers to this, to answer this, because, people have their qualms with the internet, and I get it. It's not a real place, but when I was in the ICU 15 years ago, like I used the internet to like talk to people. And like that's like how I connected to people. And I enjoy the internet as a person that can't always be around large groups of people, or like when you're in a flare, like you can't, like you're not the same type of person. Um
Mm-hmm.
like mobile wise or maybe enthusiastically, but your values and your thoughts and the core things stay the same. So I've
Mm-hmm.
always used the internet to kind of, I think, cope with that loneliness. And I kind of sometimes turn my nose up at people that feel some type of way about the internet, because I recognize like it's actually like a disability tool in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I'll say to you. In real life, because I was so rooted in my ableism, even in my dating life, I wouldn't lead fully with what the Crohn's came with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
People would know I had it, but I would hide my symptoms.
Mhm.
But they would come out in different ways because I live with chronic pain. People can't understand that, you know. Um, and so I've gone through some things recently where I've just decided, like, I come with the kid, you
Yeah.
come with 3 kids. Like,
Yeah.
think about how like people navigate those things, and it's like it's not that much different. It's not that
Mhm.
much different. And I have experienced love early in my 20s where like I had someone who was supportive, and it wasn't my like the ideal relationship I look at, but I took those pieces of like, yeah, I would need that type of support. As far as how I deal with it, that's probably where a lot of grief shows up too. I go to my infusions alone. I do a lot of things alone. Um, and I cry. I cry. And because it hurts. Not
Mhm.
because, I'm sure I could ask somebody and they probably would be there, but you don't want to inconvenience anyone. Like there's so many layers that it's not
Yeah.
black and white. It's so nuanced. Because my friends might hear this and be like, girl, you could have called me. Um,
Right.
but it's in the middle of the day. People work, people got jobs. But I deal with a lot of grief. And Sydney, I have to say, because I don't look like what I go through, that makes it very lonely. Like I'm not saying that one way is less or lonely. That's not but I do feel like this visibility thing I've been dealing with is like someone just said to me yesterday, like, you don't even look like you went through anything. But to go through the thing, to go through it and to know you did, sometimes I have to call my mom and say, like, did that happen?
Yeah.
Just to reality, yes, just to reality check.
Yes.
Did that happen? And my mom,
Yeah.
like, yes, baby, it happened. And so that's where I experience my most loneliness is that it's almost like a lack of belief. And I kind of just walk through life like that. And I always say, like, if it weren't for the surgeries, I would have no proof. And
Mhm.
and I think that's what is coming up for me when you inquire around that and the grief. I grieve on purpose. I wanted to go back to that for a moment too, so I will add that if I can. I grieve on
Okay.
purpose. So when you said like I dedicated a day to just crying and being, I think that's so powerful.
Mhm.
The discharge that is happening, and when people express like I suppress or I can't cry, I also have experienced that. But to grieve on purpose is to say like I'm lonely, but I'm not alone. Like we not alone,
Yeah.
you know. I'm
Mhm.
lonely now. And what is that feeling? What is that sensation? How can I make that lonely a little more comfortable
Mhm.
and allow myself to be sad about it? Let myself feel what loneliness feels like. I want to feel the interior of it because I'm living, I'm alive. And
Yeah.
that's half of the battle with chronic illnesses. You're facing your mortality more often.
Mhm.
So I'm not trying to romanticize hurt or pain, but again, the way I have found live with is to say like, okay, when I'm happy and I'm good, I'm really in the moment. When I'm these things, what happens to me? Where do I go?
Mhm.
And as a writer, I think it's important for me to do that because it informs a lot of my writing. Um,
Mhm.
so that's what comes up for me with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a perfect segue. My next question was about your writing and this book, Towards What Hurt.
Yeah.
Um, you wrote this during your recovery from your last surgery, or you put it together
I would
during?
say I put it together. There's new pieces in it. I wrote there's probably like 10 new pieces, but a lot of the writing has been written over the last, I'll give it 10 years. Pretty much since my first surgery, since like
Mhm.
15 years. So I put it
Mhm.
together. My friend, was that the end of your question? I don't want to interrupt your
Yeah. Uh-huh.
question. Yeah.
You're good.
My friend is a writer, and I told her, I was like, I really just want to write through recovery. And my initial thought was like, I'm going to write something new. I've been working on this other book, I've been working on since like 2021. I was like, okay, I'm going to work on that book. But as I was sitting in my recovery, I didn't really have like the brain power to start writing, like to start working back in that book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting in my apartment and I'm surrounded by my writing. There's journals upon journals. It's all up in my phone. It's all up in my computer. It's laying around. And I'm like, we need to collect it. Like my intuition literally was like, we need to collect it all and put it together as a collection. And I've been writing poetry. I write longer form stuff. I've been writing poetry since I was a little girl, since before my diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I I share the story because it's come back to me. It's like in the fourth grade, before I got sick, before I got a diagnosis, before my parents got divorced, before life changed, I did the talent show and I wrote poetry and stand-up comedy. Those were the two things I did. Okay, get into it. And I literally like recited my poetry on a stage. And I think, in this particular recovery, it was very quiet, very still. And I allowed my body and my mind to lead me towards what was already written. And I
Yeah.
put it together and I organized it, and it happened in phases, you know, and I recognized it's kind of like a ceremony in and of itself. So it's titled Towards What Hurt, and it's a ceremony in poems. And the first movement is the portal that opens, and that's the preparation for the thing. And not everyone, in regards to diagnosis, but it's not just about chronic illness, it's about surviving childhood abuse. It's about, there's essence of heartbreak in there, but it's the preparation for life, for what's to come. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Before my first surgery, I would pray to God to prepare me for whatever was coming because I could feel something coming. So I would write to him every day or them every day, and I would just ask, please give me endurance for whatever is on the way. So the portal opens is inspired by that. And then the second movement is the wildfire, which is exactly what it sounds like, and it's the longest part of the book. And it is all of the things that require endurance. Um, there's a lot of pain in the wildfire, but it's I don't want to speak too much to it. Um, and then there's the return, which is, when you enter a portal, there is an exit out of portals. And the return is that. And the return is coming back to whomever you believe you are, despite your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I learned coming out of this last surgery, which was like, who am I when I'm not hurting? Who
Yeah.
am I when I'm not labeled? Who
Mm-hmm.
am I when I'm alone sitting here? Who am I when I'm across from like my beloveds?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be her and know her so well. And I feel very strongly about this work because I put it all together and it kind of showed itself to me. And going back into the writing post surgery, when I was so scared to go through this last surgery, I was terrified because my only reference for surgery was almost dying. So I was
Yeah.
scared, okay? And I let everyone know it. I was scared. Going back into the writing was like, yeah, I needed it. I needed to reread the words that got me to this point. And I'm like, okay, now it can go into a book. Now it can be birthed because people were saying, you need to write a book. It's like, I need to go. There's more to go. There's more fire to walk through so that I can speak and look back and say like, yes, now I can put this into the world and stand by it and know it,
Mm-hmm.
in my cells, uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it debuts September 8th, and I'm really, really excited and grateful for it. And I want to send you a copy um,
Please.
expeditiously, early
I
readers.
will buy my copy. I
You can
gotta,
do
because
that, but
the
I know
pre-orders are open, guys. The
pre-orders are
pre-orders are open.
adriamoses.com/the book. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you want people to get from this book once they read it? Um, is it something about you? Is it something you want them to unveil about themselves? Uh, what intention do you have for the reader?
I truly believe that the book will give back words that people didn't know were missing for their own self. It's
Mm-hmm.
less about me. I'm the writer. But one thing that I've loved about my work, particularly on the internet, because that's the world we live in, is that people are reading my words. They don't know me. They might not even know how my voice sounds. So they're
Mm-hmm.
reading my words in their own voice. And so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the poetry is written from the I, and not to promote me, Adria, but to promote the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I want them to take away gems, right? There might be something in there that is empowering. If you're walking through something, if you're entering something, if you're coming back from something, there also might be just resonance of like when you read the poetry, there's something in it that is familiar or reminds you or speaks to a wound,
Mm-hmm.
or a scar,
Mm-hmm.
um, a past or a present or a future. And so I'll be interested to see, especially from my early readers, what comes up, because my intention is for the reader to read it from their POV.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm offering the language.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Okay, so final question. We're wrapping up. I ask this to everybody, and it's my wild card question because people have to think about it.
Oh goodness.
What makes you what makes you noble?
Oh my goodness gracious. The word noble resonates with me so much. What makes me noble is, and I see why people have to think about it, because I think, I feel, and I think what makes me noble is my humanity, like my inherent humanity, like I'm born noble,
Mm-hmm.
um, and my dedication and like my commitment to that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in a world like this, in a landscape like this, I think like commitment is one of my best qualities. I'm a committed type of person, and I want to stay in that nobility
Yeah,
and live there. That's a beautiful question. So that's what comes up for me right now.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Adria, for sitting here and talking with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this past hour. I can't wait to read this book. I can't wait to get to know you further, and I hope all the listeners have gotten to see a different side of you that the internet can't quite capture. So until next time, this has been the Noble Ship Podcast. Bye.
Thank you.